ThePrint off the cuff. Associate partner Global PR Connect. Experience partner The Quorum. Beverage partner Chivas Regal.
Well, thank you very much. Take your seats, and if seats are not there, you can blame the popularity of our guest of the evening. There can't be enough seats. Reuven Ambassador Azar. Now, I have his permission. He's Israeli. The most informal country in the world is Israel. The most informal society. I've seen Israel from a period when the prime minister could be stopped in a restaurant and given a lecture by somebody else on how to run the country better. I don't know if it still happens or not. So I will drop all formality. Ambassador Reuven Azar represents a very interesting country, a country which is staying in the headlines, refuses to go from the headlines. I don't know if it's always a good thing these days for a country to stay in the headlines. What it does is that it makes the job of the ambassador of that country very tough and very interesting and very challenging, particularly when he is ambassador in a country also as complex and fascinating as India. And there are many questions. The rules of the evening are very simple. I will start this conversation with a few questions and then throw it open to the audience. You can raise your hand anytime. It's not as if I will say now our conversation is over. Now you have 10 minutes for questions. Please raise your hand anytime and I will recognize you and the microphone will come to you. Besides that, no rules except that please keep your mobile phones on silent. I just put mine. Thank you very much, and here we get started. Reuven, if I may, what's a question you ask most often in India?
How did you make it? How Israel made it? How did you make it? How you have managed to do this innovation and overcome all these challenges? This is a question that I'm most often asked.
You mean Israel?
Yes.
And when they say, how did you make it? Does it mean in terms of your size or geopolitical location or challenges that Israel has had?
Yeah. Despite the challenges that we've faced and the obstacles we have endured, we've been able to rise as one of the most successful nations in terms of innovation and economy. And people just wonder, how come? This is usually what I've been asked about.
What's your answer?
Well, first of all, that, innovation is derives from necessity. When you have to fight for your survival, you have to create and you have to innovate. But I think that part of the answer, you already gave it at the beginning, that in Israel, things are not only very informal, they are very flat. So our country is very flat. Sometimes it can piss you off if you are a manager or a prime minister, because it's almost impossible to rule in a situation in which everybody is completely convinced that they know better.
That's right.
And the fact that they can express that means that they are free. They are free to create, they are free to innovate, and this has, of course, advantages. It also has disadvantages.
So if you would count the advantages and disadvantages for a minute each.
Well, I would prefer to live in a country in which I feel free and I am not, let's say, overrun by hierarchy and power, and I can express myself, and I can live in a society that I enjoy mobility, that I have, I've been living in countries in which you have zero chance of going up in the social ladder, okay? The fact that you can do that in countries like Israel, like India, like the United States, that's very important because that gives you the sense of satisfaction. One of the, when I was deputy ambassador in Washington, my ambassador was busy one day. He said, okay, let go and talk with an audience. And I didn't know what to do. I started Googling, about my own country, and suddenly I discovered that Israelis are at that time, they were the 11th happiest nation in the world. Okay? And I said, this probably is a fraud. It's. So I started diving into the parameters, the criteria. And I saw, different criteria, like, you would expect, level of living, but what really struck me was one criteria, and that is solidarity. Solidarity. Now we are the 8th happiest nation in the world, okay? And the level of solidarity in Israel is something that you don't see anywhere else. I haven't seen that anywhere else. And this is, I think, what happened, what makes Israel so special and adds to the success, because people care about each other. They can, scream at each other, fight with each other, but that's because they care about each other.
Well, just to put that in perspective, Israel is a country where almost nobody ever has a majority. It's always a coalition government. Netanyahu may be in power for a long time, but it's always a coalition government. And coalition usually has a majority of 1, or if it's 3, it's a very high majority.
Right. And the politics are very stratified. So we don't have, only in the first 20 years of the country, we had one party that was a majority party. And then it changed completely, and we are having smaller parties. So the ruling party usually doesn't have more than 20 to 25% of the vote. And it has to make all these coalitions and these compromises.
Yeah, it's a proportionate system with Knesset of 120. And there is also Arab list parties who have their seats.
Right. So you have a situation in which the government can fall every week, and you have to maintain the coalition, and you have to compromise with different parties. It's a system in which the small parties have a lot of power. And sometimes it's really irritating because the government cannot rule. In addition to that, we have also a very powerful judicial system, and a very activist one. And this is one of the controversies we're having now, because what is really happening in Israel is that we have a transition from old elites to new elites, and the left in Israel that was in power for many years continued to maintain the main institutes of the state. But the demographics was such that people were, voting more conservative. So you got a situation in which the judiciary was basically legislating, because we don't have a constitution. We are like Britain. We don't have a constitution. So, for example, when it comes to gay rights, okay, so the promotion of gay rights happened mainly because of the ruling of the judiciary, not because of the legislation of the parliament. And this is creating some gaps in our system and also adds to political tension.
Yeah. And in today's situation, which is the most frequently asked question? Beginning 7th October to now.
No, when it comes to now, it's why did you do it now? Why you attack the Iranians now? People don't get it.
Yes. So why did Israel attack Iran now?
Because, I'm doing a double job here.
Yes. You're dealing with an Indian.
So we had to do it now because two existential threats, which one of them was at a critical point. What basically happened during the 7th of October, following the 7th of October, is that we dealt first of all with the Gaza Strip, and then we dealt with Hezbollah. Hezbollah used to be the biggest terrorist organization in the world, an organization that had 150,000 rockets, factories to produce them, including accurate missiles, and it basically controlled two countries, Lebanon and Syria. Because after we decimated Hezbollah, the Assad regime fell. And when the Assad regime fell, it was the first time the Iranians felt vulnerable, because they built all these 6 armies around them to attack us.
They also lost the access to Hezbollah through Syria.
Right. And they made a decision in which we have identified in our intelligence, is to sneak out to a nuclear bomb. They were enriching uranium at very high rates. However, they have frozen until that time the clandestine group that was dealing with actually constructing a nuclear device. And they renewed that. So it was a matter of time until they would have a ballistic missile armed with a nuclear bomb. They would have become officially a nuclear state. And we shared this information with the Americans. The Americans told us, okay, give us 60 days. We'll try to negotiate with the Iranians. But if they don't comply with our demands, go ahead. Not only go ahead, they planned this with us. So on day 61, we attacked. We dealt with two threats that were threats to eliminate our country, to annihilate us. One was the nuclear military threat, and the second, the ballistic missile threat. The Iranians were building ballistic missiles at the pace of about 300 per month. They already had about 3,000. They were planning to build 20,000 ballistic missiles. Now, for a country like Israel, which is half the size of Haryana, or size of Meghalaya, this is an existential threat. Now, another thing that people don't understand, if you are going to ask me what's the next question people ask you, is that they don't understand what the Iranians have against us. Like, we are 1,500 kilometers from them. We never attack them, You have this phenomenon in the Arab world and also in the Muslim world, in which countries that fight, powers that fight for hegemony, they tend to attack Israel because that's the cause that they can champion in order to get hegemony in the region. Because the main conflict in our region is not a conflict between Israel or Iran or Israel and the Palestinians. It is the conflict between Shia and Sunnah, between the descendants, the direct descendants of the Prophet, and those who fought with the Prophet. And until now, they haven't been able to sort out that conflict. So Jerusalem is for Iran one stop before Mecca and Medina. And they, unlike other countries that are very powerful in the Muslim world, they have decided 30 years ago that they're going to build a program to exterminate us. And actually, they had a program to exterminate us in 2027 with a combination of missile barrages with a ground invasion that would come from the south and from the north. So actually, what is interesting to look is that Hamas actually foiled the Iranian plan. And there was a document published about 2 weeks ago that we our intelligence catched from Hamas archives, in which Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, was apologizing to Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, for attacking Israel without coordinating it.
This is 7th of October.
On the 7th of October. The plan of the Iranians was to attack us in 2027 and eliminate us. Okay? But the critical point was now, because we understood that from the moment that they have a nuclear device, it's going to be much harder to deal with that threat.
And you think that threat is now ended, delayed, and if delayed by how much, deterred? Where are we now? We believe that we set them back a few years at least. It depends not only in their capability to reconstitute. Once a country has the knowledge of how to enrich uranium, you cannot take it from them. Yes.
But what you can do is, first of all, to attack the installations. That's what we did. And in addition, you can enforce. It depends not only on us, it depends on the international community, and it depends on how much Iran wants to be isolated. Look, we have foiled a plan that took them hundreds of billions of dollars to create, because this huge arsenal of ballistic missiles, the nuclear capabilities, and all these proxy armies, it was on the expense of the Iranian people. And it was not only threatening us, it was threatening the entire Arab world. So now they will have to choose what to reconstitute first, what to do first, and we now have access, we have penetration to their system. And the Americans have resolve to prevent them from reconstituting. So I think that this has a chance to set them back for many years. It depends how efficient people are going to be in preventing a country that has genocidal intentions, that is radical, that has cheated the world several times to go back and do exactly what they were doing before.
One thing that this exchange has done is it has shown us that it's almost impossible if somebody fires a large enough number of ballistic missiles. It's impossible to guarantee that you will stop all. Some will get through.
Right. This is a race of technology that is happening, that has been fluctuating in history between attackers and defenders since the dawn of history. There have been times in which the attackers had the advantage. Usually the attackers have the advantage. Sometimes you develop systems that can defend you in an effective way. Take, for example, Constantinople.
Yes.
Okay. So Constantinople was the place that actually, allowed the Eastern Roman Empire to survive for hundreds of years, despite all these raids that were coming from the East, until one group managed to bring it down. So at the end of the day, you have to be innovative. You have to be ahead all the time when it comes to technology. You have to develop the means to not only be effective in attacking your enemy, but also in defending yourselves. You are right that when it comes to ballistic missiles, our rate of success was about 90%. It's not good enough, but it at least allowed us to conduct this offensive in an efficient way.
I'm making the point also, say from your side, which would be that is why it would be unacceptable to have any nuclear capability, because if that one that escapes is nuclear, then what happens? Right. Particularly for a small country like Israel.
Look, the Iranians have said that Israel is a one-bomb country. Sometimes you ask yourself, why they're stating that? They could have do it without stating it. That it would be much more dangerous, right? But no, they don't want to call it. They just want to do it. Israel has had this doctrine of preventing countries in the region from acquiring nuclear weapons. Unfortunately, the international structure, the NPT, was prone to multiple attempts of deceive, and most of them came from the Middle East, from Iraq, from Syria, from Libya, and from Iran.
Yeah. So a question that I know many want to ask you, but some might be shy because it's a social evening also. If X number of countries can have nuclear weapons, from left, right, center, all kinds of ideologies, nationalisms, why can't Iran?
Well, that's a great question. Look, there are international, I come from international relations, and there are international relation theorists that actually thought that if many countries would have possessed nuclear weapons, the world would be safer and more stable, because countries would be more cautious when it comes to using force. Unfortunately, it has proven completely wrong, okay? Because in security issues, you have intentions and you have capabilities. The problem with, let's say, during the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union was that you were dealing with countries that had ideologies and were fighting over power, but they weren't genocidal, okay? The Soviet Union was not in the business of exterminating the last American. Here you have a situation, in which a country actually swears to destroy another country. So you have a situation in which the intentions are so genocidal, then you don't want to give them the means to execute their agenda. So it's not equal in every state. If there would be, if there would be a change in Iran and there would be a regime or Iran would be a democracy or a normal country, then probably the fact that they are, in a rise to a nuclear weapon would be perceived differently, not only by us, but by the rest of the world as well.
Question there? That's how we will go. So please raise your hand anytime. Yes. The gentleman in the back and
Yeah, my name's Ritvik. I just had a question.
No, tell me your full name again.
Ritvik Kejriwal.
Okay.
Yeah. Why didn't you and the Americans go all the way and go for regime change?
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, we didn't have a plan of regime change. We, of course, there's a difference in life between wishful thinking and realistic plans. So if you have a business, you have to decide, whether what's your plan, what you're going to achieve. If you put your pie in the sky and you don't have an operational plan to do something, better not do it. I don't remember any case in which there was regime change from the air, okay? So nobody was planning to invade Iran or to take care of a nation of 100 million people. And therefore, we, as a democracy, which is accountable to its people, that is actually has conscription army. We are not in the business of, dragging our people to endless wars to change the political landscape in other countries. We are not capable of doing it. We don't have the will. Okay, so we concentrated in these two goals, and of course, I would be very happy if there would be a regime change in Iran, but it depends on the Iranian people. And if you are right that we had the power to inflict much more damage to Iran. If we would have continued for another week, we could probably completely destroy the Iranian economy. We are not interested in that. We are interested in a change in Iran that will see a future in which Israel is not attacked. That's it.
Question there. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Sonia. So my question is, I know that we have done our best to make sure that Iran doesn't achieve the goals that it wanted to. What happens if they do? What happens if behind everyone's strategies, they actually get a ballistic missile, which happens to be a nuke?
Well, we will live in a completely different world because when a country that has such an aggressive agenda can find immunity with nuclear arsenal, they tend to become much more aggressive. And countries in the world would challenge, would hesitate whether to challenge that. And that means that the nature of our region would change. And probably more countries would court the Iranians. And we would basically be probably exterminated. That would be the reality.
Question there.
Hi, my name is Yamini. First of all, so I think it's a tough question to ask because India...
First say what you were saying first of all.
Yes. So my name is Yamini. My question was, I wanted to shift gears and probably understand from you, have you been able to achieve that goal in Gaza? Because there are multiple narratives out there, especially about some of the humanitarian issues over there. And it's a tough room to ask this question because India and Israel have been friends for a long time. But I would just love to know what is your take on that?
Very thick-skinned ambassador. And he is an Israeli. You can ask him what you want. He will not duck.
So that and probably like why news outlets like Al Jazeera are not allowed over there. Yeah.
Well, first of all, he's right. The most difficult questions are being asked by Israelis. So don't be afraid to ask hard questions. Look, you happen to speak with a person whose first job in the foreign ministry was to go to Gaza and make friends with Gazans and with the Fatah movement, with the Palestinian Authority and with a future Palestinian state. That was my job back in '94. Why am I'm telling you this? It's because Israel tried almost every possible solution when it comes to the Palestinian question. We have offered the Palestinians a state. We actually invited a former terrorist organization with 100,000 fighters into our territory in order to establish self-rule for the Palestinians, okay? That backfired on us. We were a bit naive, okay? And 25 years ago, you had the second intifada and terrorism, and etc. Despite that, in 2005, we have withdrawn from the Gaza Strip completely. And Hamas took over. And Hamas did the 7th of October. I won't tell you all the story. We don't have time. But the bottom line is that the majority of Israelis have gotten to the conclusion that we cannot live with Hamas in the Gaza Strip, and we have to take them out. It's a very difficult task. It may take a long time. It entails a huge human cost that derives mainly from the fact that Hamas is embedded into the population and using the population as human shields. And we have huge criticism from the world. But believe me, we prefer to be unpopular than to be dead. So for the foreseeable future, we will be unpopular. Despite the fact that we are doing, the utmost to get people out of harm's way and to try to kill as minimum possible Palestinians. But when you have a situation with these people, one of the interviewers were asking me, are you telling me that under 17 hospitals in Gaza, Hamas is hiding? I said, yes, we have the proof for that, okay? This is the situation. So we are working now with local forces. We are now embarking in taking the humanitarian assistance out of Hamas' hands in order to debilitate them. To tell you that we're going to succeed next week? No, it's going to take time. It's going to be very painful. Al Jazeera, I thank you so much for asking the question about Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera is a very, very dangerous entity, especially Al Jazeera Arabic, which is completely different from Al Jazeera in English, okay? I happen to know Arabic because I was interested in my neighbors when I was growing up in Jerusalem, and I served in 2 Arab countries. This is the station of the Muslim Brotherhood. It's a station that basically promotes hatred of Israel, hatred of everything that is non-Muslim, and unfortunately is being harbored by a country which is one of the richest countries in the world. Al Jazeera is a governmental organization that has a double insurance. On the one hand, they're enjoying American presence, okay? This basis that was so-called attacked now in Qatar, Ludeid base, is an American base for which the Qataris pay $10 billion per year, okay? And in parallel, they have the other insurance is by courting the radicals. And in this way, they can sustain a situation that a bunch of 300,000 people is sitting on the biggest barrel of gas and oil in the world and producing, huge quantities and buying off everybody, including Israelis, by the way. I'm not here saying that they're taking for the right everybody and we are the only smart people. No, the Qataris are taking us to a ride as well.
It's an incredible country because in a way, it's friends with everybody, it's hosting everybody, it's letting everybody attack everybody. And if I quote a line from a columnist in your favorite Israeli paper, Haaretz, it says Qatar, by agreeing to host the Iranian missile strikes on itself, it helped de-escalate the situation. So it can also host ballistic missile strikes on itself. It's a country of 3.5 lakh people, right? It's quite a global curiosity.
Yeah. For many years, we allowed Al Jazeera to operate in Israel, but what happened during the 7th of October is that we discovered that the majority of the Al Jazeera reporters in the Gaza Strip were actually Hamas operatives. Okay, so like, for example, Hassan Eslih was the most famous Al Jazeera journalist. He was part and parcel of Hamas military wing. Okay, so these guys are terrorists. This is the conclusion.
Like an armed terrorist or terrorist in ideas?
No. Look, the military wing of Hamas had a list of members, okay? Hassan Eslih was a member, okay? He was a reporter. He was actually doing reportage for Hamas, was serving Hamas. But he's a part of an organization, okay? And he's also was getting paid by Al Jazeera, okay? So we are having a situation in which they go over the edge, One thing is to sympathize. Everybody is entitled to have an opinion. But when you actively support a terrorist organization and you are a member of it, that's another story.
Question there, in the back. Okay, and then in the back, and the lady in the back, and then we'll come to the front. Yes.
Good evening. Ambassador Shekhar, thank you for being here. Thank you for hosting this event.
Your name.
My name is Ankit Ranjan. There are unconfirmed reports that Chinese aircraft are disappearing over Tehran during the conflict. Is Iran enjoying Chinese support, and will this devolve into a proxy conflict? Addendum, will Iran regroup and be back with a Hail Mary, or will cooler heads prevail? Thank you.
Yeah, we are being asked a lot about both China and Russia. China, to the best of my knowledge, hasn't been supplying major platforms to Iran. Iran has been able to feed, like many other countries, from raw materials that are coming from China, including for its ballistic missile program. But we haven't seen huge investments of China in Iran, and so far we haven't seen a trend that would make Iran a Chinese proxy. It doesn't mean that in the future it can happen. I think that Iran, this regime, is pretty isolated. I think that there are not many countries that support it, not many countries that like it. For many years we've been also engaging with the Russians because we didn't want them to, export sophisticated weapons to the Iranians and others. Sometimes we succeed, sometimes we don't succeed. But the bottom line is that the Iranian regime doesn't have an air force today. It doesn't have a foreign supplied army. It can change in the future. We hope it doesn't change.
Yeah. Before we go to the next question, there's something that happened in India, in the Indian situation and the Israeli situation, which had one common factor: Donald Trump. In each situation, Donald Trump has claimed credit for bringing about peace, right? This adds up to 2 of his 7 claims for Nobel Peace Prizes. The reaction in India has been very sharp. No mediation, he did nothing, Israelis seem to be calm about this. So tell us the secret sauce, or tell me, why is the situation or the reaction different in the 2 countries?
Well, I'll tell you something from my personal experience. If you want some people to cooperate with you and you want to succeed in life, don't fight for credit.
Don't try?
Don't fight for credit.
Oh. All right. Question, I think somebody in the back, right? The lady in the back, yes.
Hi, I'm Bismi. I would like to go back to Gaza and have a follow-up question on that. Is time and again we have been seeing reports of children dying amid what is going on there, amid the escalation, malnutrition reports of children dying on a daily basis. Your reaction to this, and also the follow-up question: till when do you think this will continue? Like you mentioned that Hamas is quite into the system there, and which is why the ongoing escalation is at this point. But having said all of this, what do you think will be the end, and when can we see an end to this? My second question is regarding the reporters of Al Jazeera that you mentioned were involved in active terrorism. If you could tell us what qualifies as active terrorism, what proof does Israel have that they were involved in such activities? Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so first of all, we have supplied to the Gaza Strip, despite the fact that we are under no obligation under international law to feed our enemy, we have facilitated the entrance of 1.8 million tons of food into the Gaza Strip in the last 20 months, okay? We have stopped that in a period of time after the second ceasefire, and after 25,000 lorries entered the Gaza Strip, because we wanted to take, as I told you before, the control on the humanitarian effort from Hamas, because Hamas was sequestrating the humanitarian aid and selling it to the population, to their own population, in order to continue their grip on power. This is a very cynical attitude, but we understood that if we don't try to take it from them, they will continue ruling the Gaza Strip. So although there has been hunger in the Gaza Strip, for sure there is no starvation, and there is a lot of disinformation unfortunately, being published, including from the UN, including a guy in the UN that said that if Israel doesn't change policy, the 14,000 kids are going to die from hunger within 48 hours. That was complete nonsense, okay? So the population in the Gaza Strip is suffering, but Israel is acting very professionally. We have a group that is monitoring the humanitarian situation day by day, is in touch with people on the ground, and we are making sure that there is enough food in the Gaza Strip. If there wouldn't have been enough food in the Gaza Strip, you would see hundreds of thousands of people being starving from death, like you saw in the conflicts in Sudan or in other places. You don't see it in the Gaza Strip. Now, regarding your questions on journalists, yes, we have the proof. We have been uncovering the archives of the Hamas intelligence, which, by the way, was embedded under a UN installation. So imagine that the intelligence group of a terrorist organization was sitting and feeding from the electricity and the communications of a UN organization. Okay? And when we took control, we analyzed the findings, and we saw that there are many people that we were surprised to see that there are members of Hamas, including 1,300 UNRWA workers. So imagine that you would have a UN organization that 1,300 people are being paid by the UN, by your money, and they are members of a terrorist organization. That's the reality in Gaza. Now, the war can end today. The only thing that has to happen is that they have to release the hostages and renounce power in the Gaza Strip. Because the people are fed up, the world is fed up, and nobody is going to help the Gaza Strip, by the way, or reconstruct it while a terrorist organization is controlling it, because they had enough. So it's about time that Hamas renounces power, and if they don't, this will continue.
Just for a little reality check, all of Gaza is about 1/3 the size of Goa. It's about 1/3 the size of Goa and has about as much population as Goa. So it's very thickly populated. So Reuven, before we go to the next question, something that's on many people's minds. How did you've kept close watch on Gaza all this while? How did Hamas manage to build these tunnels? These tunnels are a reality. We can see the pictures and videos. These are concretized. These are very strong. How does anybody manage to build these without Israel finding out?
Well, we have left the Gaza Strip, as I told you, 18 years ago. Even before we left, there were areas in Gaza in which the Israeli army wasn't present. And therefore, because of the land is very sandy.
Can I interrupt you for a second? I mean, you even knew for, say, Iranian generals and nuclear scientists, in which artery of their heart did they have a stent in or not? I mean, I said you had very detailed information on Israeli generals, scientists. I said you would even know out of the 5 arteries in the heart, if they had a stent
look,
in
it's
2
a
or
great
1.
question.
But how come we did not know about the tunnels in Gaza?
Okay, it's a great question, and I'm going to answer that. First of all, it's very easy to dug tunnels in the Gaza Strip because it's sandy, and you can do it actually with your bare hands. What Hamas was doing was stealing concrete that was being donated to build hospitals and to build installations in the Gaza Strip, and we were building this infrastructure. Now, because of the fact that Hamas was having such a grip on the population, and by the way, the specialty of Sinwar was to kill collaborators. He has a record of killing Palestinians that were collaborating with Israel. So our intelligence agencies actually have lost the grip on the Gaza Strip, and they didn't have enough information about what's going on inside. As you said, it's a very small territory. Hamas was having a very violent and very strong grip on the population. So unlike the situation in Iran, in which many Iranians actually find it quite tempting to work with us and cooperate with us, that wasn't the situation in Gaza. And that's the answer.
My name is Himanshu. I was just trying to compare the situation, what Israel faces and what India faces. For Israel, it's a matter of survival in a surrounded by all largely hostile neighbors. Although the hostility seems to be restricted mainly to Iran now, not the other countries so much.
Iran's not a neighbor.
I know, but the region is same. Yeah, it's not a neighbor. But for India, it's an unhealing ulcer. Pakistan, not a question of survival. What do you think are, if you were in the decision authority for India, what would you say we should do?
And don't say that I don't talk about my host country. That Israelis don't have that pass.
Look, I'll because I'm a diplomat and I'm not going to give advice to anybody. But I'll not evade your question. Okay. Let's look at a little bit at what happened now in Operation Sindoor. Okay. You have a situation in which your country is rising very fast and is completely immersed in the agenda of developing the country, creating prosperity, creating stability for the people, okay? And you don't want to be distracted by this, right? So what do? You have basically two options. One option is to deter your rival by showing resolve and create periods of quiet that will allow you to continue embarking in your project, right? This is exactly what Israel tried to do for the last 18 years when it comes to Gaza and also when it comes to Hezbollah in Lebanon, etc. So usually our military confrontations were very short and we were trying to send a strong message with a military strike that would undermine the capabilities of the other side and then buy us time to continue our project. And actually it was pretty successful. Israel doubled its GDP in the last 10 years from about $30,000 to almost $60,000 per capita. Okay? You are doing the same. The question is, what happens when a 7th of October happens? If, God forbid, Palgam was multiplied by 10,000, then I think you would find yourself in a situation in which Operation Sindoor wouldn't have been enough, and you would have entered a much more serious conflagration. So this is the comparison. In a democracy, you do the minimum that you need in order to neutralize threats and concentrate on what the people elected you for doing. So to a certain extent, we are fighting the same war. A war against radicals, against people that actually, as much as you succeed, they want to take you back. And the question is how they narrow the gap in order to bring you down, okay? And your challenge is to keep them down and go up. So we are working together on many of these challenges. We are working together to neutralize terrorist threats, to develop the capabilities we need in order to continue dealing with that in a way that will minimize the need to go to war every Tuesday, okay?
Aditya, if you'd stand up and ask Aditya.
Yeah. I'm Aditya Ghosh. Maybe on similar lines, when about 100 years ago or when we were studying history in school, it was somewhat easier.
That wasn't 100 years ago.
No.
It's only in your case. Right?
Yeah.
Only I can say that.
So, it was kind of easier to figure out who your enemies were and who your allies were, right? This is a fast-changing world where every morning when you open Twitter or social or Truth Social, you'll kind of learn who your new allies and your new friends and your new enemies are. So the first question was that as a country, and especially like you said, it's a flat country, lots of people have their own voices. How are the Israeli people sort of seeing this changing landscape where your biggest ally is also cozying up with a country in your region, Qatar, where you have challenges with? The second is, again, as learnings from the Israeli people, in all of this, you've also have the most innovative society, the largest number of startups per capita, and so on and so forth. What's the lesson for a diverse country like India, which is also trying to achieve the great Indian dream in the next 25 years? How do we kind of stay focused on that economic or or agenda of prosperity for hundreds of millions of our citizens, and not get distracted by all the challenges that are in the region. Yeah.
Aditya looks young, but he's helmed 2 airlines, Indigo and now Akasa.
Okay. So the short answer is build your defense and liberalize your markets. Because as much as you have a stronger defense, people will have the confidence to come and invest in your country. And as much as you liberalize the market, people will feel free to be entrepreneurs. We need more entrepreneurs. We have to have some ambassadors and people who get salaries from the government. But at the end of the day, the country is going to prosper thanks to the entrepreneurs. So strong defense and liberalization of markets.
And Ambassador, the first question of how you're seeing your new friends, old friends becoming...
Look, this is a very interesting question. And in the past, we lived in an international state system. Today, you have many companies that are much stronger than states. And you have to navigate in a world in which you have to deal with different forces. Some of them are not states. Most of the challenges we've been dealing with in the last 20 years was coming from terrorist organizations that some of them were stronger than states. The conventional army of Hezbollah was much stronger than an average European country. Okay? So with some of them, you have to cooperate. Against some of them, you have to fight. Some will be your friends. Some of them will be your enemies. And some of them will be your frenemies.
Houthis, for example. Houthis have more ballistic missiles than most countries in the world.
Yeah, and that's another example. Look, you were asking before about what if Iran becomes nuclear. Most of the nuclear countries I know are not proliferating weapons of mass destruction. I know 2 of them that have been doing that. One of them is North Korea. The second of them is Pakistan, right? What if you had a country that actually already was planning to transfer a nuclear bomb to the Houthis? This is intelligence that our Prime Minister exposed only last week. They were planning to transfer a nuclear bomb to the Houthis. Can you imagine that?
Yeah, because they are non-state actors. They are non-state actors with more than half a state with them. So this is complicated. Rohit and then Soumya, the guest first.
My name is Rohit. You said your aim was not really regime change in the final reckoning, but you bombed that particular jail in Tehran, which was a sign in terms of wanting the uninitiated and the background music to come and play the symphony up front. I really think, did you guys really have the whereabouts, knew where the Khomeini was hiding, where a bunker Khomeini was hiding and you could have taken him out? I feel it was a lack of your intelligence that you stopped.
Well, first of all, regarding Evin prison, it was a symbolic strike. There is a difference between an operational plan to do something, a soft power campaign, and a symbolic act. Okay, this was a symbolic act. Regarding Khamenei, I don't know if we had the intelligence or we didn't have the intelligence. I think that if we would have gone to a plan that is more comprehensive and would have devastated Iran to the extent that it would hit not only its economic infrastructure, but also the highest leadership, it would create some effects that I think would be negative for us, especially in the way that our neighbors look at us, because you never want to have a neighbor that is too bullish, right? Even if he has the power and he decides to use the power in an irresponsible way, then you can get some of your neighbors from becoming your friends to become your enemies. You don't want to do that. You don't want to get into situations that the Iranians the regime would have actually succeeded in convincing some of the powers that be to supply them the weapons that they want. Because they haven't been supplying those weapons because they know that Iran is extreme and is radical and is genocidal. But if you start behaving like them, then you lose your some of your legitimacy and you lose some of the clout that you have on other players as well. And that's why I think another reason why we acted with restraint in that regard.
Soumya in the back. Soumya and then gentleman here. Yes.
Good evening, Ambassador. My name is Soumya Pillai. I wanted to bring the conversation back to the attacks on Fordo, because that was one of the points that Israel was really concerned about. Just a day before Fordo was attacked by the US, there are certain satellite images which show that there was a lot of movement around Fordo, raising the questions of whether Iran was able to, safeguard a lot of what was happening inside Fordo. Do you have any initial assessment of how much damage has the attack on Fordo been able to cause?
Well, I'm sure that the intelligence agencies now are doing their job and will issue a report that I won't see and you won't see it either, okay? Maybe at some point some of it will be leaked, I don't know, if somebody has an interest in that. But probably we won't know the answer to your question. But what is important in our perspective is that, as I said before, the fact that Iran will continue to possess fissile material that is enriched to a high level doesn't mean that they will be able to reconstitute their plan that easily, the nuclear plan that easy, because first of all, we have destroyed their centrifuges factory. We have destroyed, as I said, we had taken out this criminal gang that was, dealing with arming a nuclear device, and that was pretty particular information and technology that not many in the world possess. We have hit dozens of sites that were related to the nuclear program, and we continue to have penetration into the Iranian system and the resolve to deal with the situation in which Iran re-embarks in a military nuclear plan. Now, the Iranian leaders will have to decide not only what part of their plans they want to reconstitute, they will have to think about what will be the retaliation, but even more importantly, they will have to decide how they want to engage with the world. Because one of the last things what I learned from my experience when I was working on the Iranian file is that they don't want to be isolated. So if they will continue to ignore the calls from the IAEA to cooperate with them, I think it wouldn't be necessarily serving their interest. So there are many questions that we have to ask ourselves. We don't know yet, not only what is the situation when it comes to your question about accumulated material, but we don't know yet what the Iranian leadership will decide to do. Time will tell.
Well, all I like, Soumya covered science for us. As you know, nuclear weapons is a 1945 technology. So the crucial thing is not so much the material or the mechanics, but the intention. So as long as a sovereign nation has the intention, there is a possibility. So the question here is also to counter the intention, isn't it?
Right. Intention is very important, because at the end of the day, if you want to completely neutralize a nuclear plan, it's either you do it with a decision of the government in charge or with a full ground invasion. And we are not planning that.
Yeah. Yes, you have a question there?
My name is Ramachandra Patri. If I'm not wrong, Israel spends around 5% of its GDP on defense. Trump has also been saying lately that 5% has to be done for NATO. Mr. Shekhar Gupta on many of his shows keeps saying that India is very below its 2%. Do you think 5% is the new norm, especially for the developed or developing and democratic nations?
Well, it depends on the threats. In our case, we were investing almost 6% of our GDP before the war. Hopefully, we'll be able to go back to these numbers in the future, especially if our economy continues growing, and it seems that it is going to continue growing. But there are countries that are not threatened, and therefore they don't need to invest anything. For many years, many European countries thought that the wars is something of the past when it comes to Europe. It will never come back. And therefore, they didn't invest anything in their armed forces. Now they got to the conclusion that they were wrong, and that there was a huge gap between their ambitions when it comes to the expansion of the European project and the capability to back it up with military power. And the Americans got fed up. They got to a situation in which this preferential treatment that we're giving to different countries on trade, with a combination of subsidizing their security, is actually making them bankrupt. And what this administration is trying to do is to correct the system. And of course, it reminds you, I don't know how many, some of the people here are pretty, prominent business people. There's a story about this guy that, gave his son a Ferrari. One day decided to take the Ferrari. And the son was, he was cursing him and saying, how much, you don't care about me. Right? So now America is taking back the Ferrari. You have to decide what you're going to do.
That's why they call Trump daddy now. Correct. Question there. Yes. So before you ask a question, just to correct you, I never said, I said India should spend more on defense, but not 5%. We are a very large GDP, very poor country. 1.9% of GDP is already 13% of our budget, which is a lot. I said go up to 2.5 over 3 years and stay there for a few years. That is our price for buying peace with our friendly neighbors for the next 20 years. Go ahead.
Good evening. I'm Rajat. Just wanted to ask you.
You were saying something?
What our Prime Minister used to say is don't bother dealing with the percentage. Just make sure your economy grows. Then you'll solve everything.
Wanted to ask you, how do you intend to redraw the West Asia map, redraw it, once you've achieved your strategic objectives? That's number one. And number two, how do you manage Donald Trump once he's taken the plane from Qatar?
What's your name?
Rajat Chatterjee.
We are not in business of redrawing the map of the Middle East. Israel is pretty different from other powers in the region. And you could see that very clearly following the turmoil that started in 2011, what was called the Arab Spring. You had Arab countries that collapsed or that entered into a huge turmoil. Israel didn't interfere there to try to determine their political future. There were other countries that did interfere, like, for example, Iran and Turkey. Okay? So we are in the business of trying to serve our interests, and as much as we are concerned with dealing with our threats, we are trying to also grasp opportunity, and that's why we do have an interest in expanding the Abraham Accords, but this has nothing to do with redrawing maps. It's just a matter of fulfilling the common interest we have with those countries that are more pragmatic in our region and are interested, like us, to promote stability and connectivity. Now, the United States of America is the most important ally of Israel. It doesn't mean that all the time our interests align and that we will concur on everything that each country does. So you could see the American president taking the plane from Qatar. You could see him being mad on television at our prime minister for retaliating for the fact that the Iranians breached the ceasefire. It doesn't mean that we don't have this bond. A bond that, like our bond with India, is a bond that is based on values, that is a bond that is based on common interest. And, you can have different opinions from time to time. That's the end of the world. Especially, it's not the end of the world when it's with leaders that have, they are a bit eccentric or idiosyncratic in the way that they behave themselves. That's okay. You cannot, base your decisions on national security on each and every word that anybody is saying. At the end of the day, you have to make sure that you are in sync with the strategy, with the policy, with the interest. And this is the situation we are having with the United States.
So in the same post, Donald Trump said good things about Israel, but he also called Iran a magnificent country, etc., etc. If such a thing, he has said much less than that about Pakistan in the same post. And that's caused a bit of neurosis in India. So do you think that advice should apply to India as well, that calm down, leaders have their own ways of dealing with things?
I think we are having, in the world that we live today, it's not just in the conduct of leaders. I think it's in the general sense with the explosion of information, with the change in the landscape of the information sources. In the world that we grew up, you tended to trust different outlets to give you information. Now it has become much more difficult. So we have a challenge as human beings in general, but also countries have the challenge to actually analyze.
But diplomacy is changing, because if the president of the US does it in public.
Look, I don't complain. It makes my life more interesting. At the end of the day, the world is becoming complex. It's changing very fast. The things that we were used to are no longer relevant. Diplomacy is changing, and you have to adapt. It's either you adapt or you don't.
I think everybody has to learn to be less emotional about diplomacy now.
Especially if you're handling something that means something. If you're handling a business, if you're managing a country, you have to be able to take things in proportion. It runs counter to the dynamic of media, because media always looks for the sensational, looks for the eccentric. It's man beat dog, not dog beat man, right?
These days, stories in Indian media are more about dog biting man, which upsets dog lovers like us very much. And Rohit is there. That said, yes.
Hi, good evening. My name is Mansi. I understand from your answers that the reason for not completely exterminating such a large looming threat that Iran is for your country is A, humanitarian, B, strategic when it comes to your neighbors. How much of it is also because of the fact that war is good for business and maybe your allies don't want that business to go down overall? Like, is that some part of the...
Yeah, too many Hollywood movies.
More questions. We'll just take one out and then he has to go. Yes, you've been raising your hand for a long time. Yes.
Thank you so much. Homeland visits have continued.
Your name first?
Ankit Ranjan.
Yes.
Yes. Homeland visits have continued during the Israel-Hamas conflict. How and why have you kept those visits going?
I didn't understand the question. Can you repeat slowly?
Homeland visits, people of Jewish origin living overseas, coming and visiting their country.
Yeah.
Yes, those have been ongoing during the war.
Yes.
How and why have you kept those going? Has it not posed a threat?
Look, what this war caused to our people, to the Jewish people, is really unimaginable. The sense of common destiny, the sense of togetherness. Israel is one of the only countries in the world in which when a war starts, instead of people going out, they start coming in. Okay? So when the 7th of October happened, we had 250,000 Israelis abroad, and they fought to come back. And this same sense happened with many Jews around the world that kept coming to Israel. This whole connection between the people in diaspora is something that is very interesting. I am working with Indians that are also in charge of that, because your diaspora is the biggest diaspora in the world, and this connection with the diaspora is very, very important. Actually, to a certain extent, it's also important for your national security. And as I said, solidarity is the name of the game. The question is how much solidarity you have in your society. In our case, I think it's quite substantial.
Question.
Yeah, hi, I'm Ashish Gupta. Maybe let me stand. So really insightful information and insightful discussion. I have one question. Do you foresee a resolution to this conflict in a recent future? And from your perspective, what would that resolution be? How and when?
Which conflict, Iran or Gaza?
Iran.
I don't know the answer to your question. I really hope to see a change in Iran. think that that would bring the conflict to an end, because we have a very friendly relationship with the Iranian people in general. We go back 2,500 years when Cyrus the Great emancipated the empire and allowed the Jews to go back to Jerusalem after the Babylonian catastrophe. Look, I think that we can develop a security regime, a security structure. We have started doing that following the Abraham Accords. The skies of West Asia today are being monitored, and we are coordinating our actions with many of the players in the region, the United States, of course, but also other Arab countries. So as much as we manage to decimate, or at least degrade, the capability of the radicals to harm us, and we build a stronger structure of mutual security and economic cooperation, I have great hope that we'll be able to stabilize the situation for the long term. This has been, I think, a historical moment, a moment in which we turn the tide after 30 years that Iran has been working to harm us and to annihilate us. And now there is an opportunity not only for us, also for our neighbors, to act in a more robust way, in a more ambitious way, to build a better future for our country. I'll take the last question.
Yeah, the last question from the lady there. Yeah. Yes.
Hi, thank you for this evening.
Your name, ma'am?
I'm Atrey Das. And this is a very non-political question, more to do with the culture. Thank you for mentioning solidarity as a key source of strength for your country and people. I have many Israeli friends myself, and I've also done an internship for an Israeli company once. My question to you is, what do you think is the source of solidarity? Is it having a common enemy? And if you were to think about or hypothesize a possible threat to this solidarity, what would it be?
Oh, wow. This is a great question. Look, I think that some of it has to do with our culture. Some of the elements of our culture. There was a very famous story, because we are a very ancient religion, and we look a bit different, especially throughout history. And one day a Gentile came to a rabbi and asked him, can you give me, in one sentence, what is Judaism? And the rabbi said, look, I cannot give you the essence of Judaism in one sentence. But the guy, was really stubborn. If you have to give me one sentence, he says, love your neighbor as yourself. That is the essence of Judaism. And that's why we have solidarity in our people.
So we can't take more questions from there, but I'll ask him one and a half before we close this, and then there'll be a vote of thanks from Quorum and a tiny memento for the guest. You see the Zohran Mamdani phenomenon in New York?
What about it?
What do you think about it? This phenomenon rising in New York City?
Well, first of all, it's a problem with the New Yorkers. We have enough problems. But no, seriously, look, you have this phenomenon, we spoke about it a little bit before we started, of Islamists coalescing with leftists, which is quite peculiar when you look at it. I think that the reason is because in the core of the Muslim Brotherhood ideology, you have this issue of dawah, of social justice, of solidarity, of help, etc. The only challenge is that what in many countries the left doesn't get is that is like the opposite of communism. In communism, you have revolution, and then you have dictatorship of the proletariat for indefinite period of time until you have utopia, right? That's communism. With the Muslim Brotherhood, it's the opposite. You have da'wah and social justice until the moment of revolution. Then you have permanent theocracy. And some people don't get it. So they coalesce with the Muslim Brotherhood, and after the Muslim Brotherhood takes over, they eliminate the left. This is what happened in Iran, unfortunately. The supporters of Khamenei were only 7%. This is what happened in Egypt. After the Arab Spring, Morsi came to power, and everybody was sure that there will be social justice. But the Muslim Brotherhood became a corrupt regime, and they were taken out. So I think, not every place is the same, and there are different variations of the Muslim Brotherhood. In some places they are more violent, like in the Gaza Strip. There are some places they are more moderate. Take, for example, Morocco. There, the Moroccan government has been able to include them in the government. By the way, in Israel, we have a Muslim Brotherhood party in our parliament. Have you heard about that?
Yes.
So at the end of the day, every country has to do their own thinking. What works for New Yorkers, that's the business of New Yorkers.
Okay, I think I'll say thank you very much. But I said 1.5 questions, so half question. What element of the Middle East problem is a Muslim-Jewish problem, or what isn't?
I don't think that the Jews have any problem with Muslims. Okay, I think that a situation in which a radical interpretation, which says that non-Muslims cannot have sovereign rights, do not have the right of self-determination, that is the challenge that we are facing. In the eyes of a lot of people in the Middle East, Jews are not a people. They are a religion that has to be subjugated to Islam, like Christianity, in the countries that they regard as Muslim countries. Okay? So we have a challenge in that sense, because there are many people, including people that are not extremist, that they have this way of thinking. So it took us a lot of time and effort to convince them the contrary, that the Jews actually are a people, that we have a right of self-determination, that we have the resolve to defend our state, and they have to accept it, whether they like it or they don't like it.
And because some like it, you have Abraham Accords.
Right. So there are many opportunities. At the end of the day, not all the people are radical. I think there are many decent people in our region that want to build a better life, that are entrepreneurial, they are interesting, they want to engage, they talk to us. I have many friends in the Arab world, and I'm sure that we will find a way to push through and to succeed in this fight against radicalism.
So thank you very much. I know this can go on, but every good thing also must come to an end. Thank you very much, Ambassador. A good round of applause for him. This is truly Israel speak, not even needing diplomatic immunity, isn't it?
Thank you so much, everyone. This was our second off the cuff with ThePrint. We had our last one in Mumbai, then the second one over here. We intend to take it to Hyderabad as well. So thanks for being such an amazing audience. Hope you had a great time. And thank you, Mr. Gupta. Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
ThePrint Off the Cuff. Associate Partner Global PR Connect. Experience Partner The Quorum. Beverage Partner Chivas Regal.